Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session. I think we can start with the introduction now, as I make it 22. Welcome to the session, Climate Change as a Risk Driver for Culture and People when the water rises. And I think we could probably also call it when the water falls, because in terms of climate change, we've got the dual risk of increased rainfall causing flooding, but also sea level rise. So that's what we're talking about in this session today. And we've got some very interesting speakers for you. I'm moderating the session, and I have some help from the fabulous FAR team who have been putting this conference together, and they've been doing a wonderful job. We also have interpretation in a number of languages, so please check the interpretation channel if English isn't your preferred language. And I'd like to remind all the speakers to speak clearly for the interpreters to make their job a little bit easier. My name is Dr. Cathy Daly. I'm a lecturer in conservation at the University of Lincoln, and I do a lot of research on climate change, vulnerability assessments and adaptation for cultural heritage, mainly in Ireland. But I'm speaking to you today from Lincoln in England. Each of our speakers from around the world will have 10 minutes for their presentation, and I'm going to just let the speakers know when there's a minute to go, and then also when they've reached their 10 minutes so they can wrap up, because we want to keep time for a question and answer session at the end. So if you have questions as we go along, you can pop them in the chat or keep a note of them for the end of the session. And I think without further ado, we'll get started. So our first speaker is coming to us from Cairo in Egypt, and he is Dr. Rehab Ibrahim Ahmed ElSiedy. He's Associate Professor of Islamic Archaeology at the Faculty of Archaeology in Cairo University. And his paper is titled "A Citadel Against the Wind, the Possible Solutions to Rescue Qaitbay Citadel from Climate Change." So over to you, please.
You're still muted.
Yes, I am sorry.
Now we can hear you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. And thank you very much. I would like to thank Ibrahim, British Council, for giving me the chance to chair, to participate in this important debate, actually. I don't know if I share my presentation or not.
We can see it, but it's not in slide mode. So if you could put it in slide mode.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, my subject today is about Qaitbay Citadel for Qaitbay, and of course, Qaitbay is a significant fortification structure located in Alexandria in Egypt, and it was built, of course, by the Mamluk Sultan Ashraf Qaitbay in 1883, 1477, and of course, the structure had many values. Of course, the structure had many historical, archaeological, and social values, which were developed since it was established in the 15th century until now, as the most massive complete example of fortification has existed in the northern coast of Africa, and it witnessed the up and down change of the political power during the last 6th century. Of course, it shaped the main story of the daily life population of Alexandria and became the core of their culture. Actually, here, Qaitbay, I take it as an example for many fortification and historical building along the northern coast of Africa are standing in suspicion for its future against the climate change. Actually, we talk about what happened now. We should know what happened before. And here, when we talk about the structure of the citadel, of course, I think the Mamluk architect take in his consideration many aspects when it was built. two of these important aspects, in my opinion, is the location and its geological formation of the rock which was built on it. And secondly, the climate circumstance which affect on this location, especially if we take in our consideration that perhaps these two aspects affect on the destruction of the lighthouse or the collapse of the lighthouse before, which was one of the ancient seven wonders of the world, due a very strong earthquake at the 14th century. So I think the Mamluk architect, when he built this structure, tried to fit the new structure with all environment circumstances surrounding it, especially the wind direction and the sea waves. And actually, this could help to save the Citadel all this time. But what happened now? Nowadays, it seems that the situation is quite different due to the rapid change of the global climate announced in the climate conference COP26 that led even the British Prime Minister Johnson to think that this could cause the disappearance of Alexandria, and many following discussion based on this argument. Actually, whether this result for Alexandria is a fact or not, some recent studies refer to the increase of the climate change during the last years and how it could affect on many historical sites in Alexandria, and in particular some sites at the northern coast like Qaitbay. And actually since 2016, it is noticed some change on the rock where the Citadel built in, and here I should refer to what the solution which the government have done to solve this problem, and what possible to be done to and could be a much effective solution if the situation becomes catastrophic due to the heavy climate change which we notice now in Egypt actually. Okay, to talk about what has done, we should talk here about and highlight the effort of the Egyptian government presented in the Ministry of Antiquities and the Tourism and Antiquities Alexandria office, as they have begun to put many strategies and sustainable projects to protect the Qaitbay Citadel and the location around it with the national and international cooperation. Actually, they almost finished, as we see in this photo, they almost finished the restoration of the building, and even they make protection for the coast and harbor surrounding it, putting like putting concrete barriers surrounding the harbor and the coast. And furthermore, they built like a big circle bridge of also from concrete around the citadel to prevent and to limit the sea waves surrounding the citadel. And actually, it is noticed here very, very clear through Google Earth, as we see here. Above of all, we have many data, many studies, many publications in Arabic, in English, in French, and in a lot of language. And here, this very, very important data talking about the citadel, its location, the history of this location, and what happened in this location. Here, I could suggest many important solutions for what we could do next. Here, I could suggest that it's important to make a documentation, but here not individual documentation. I mean here a real project documentation using collecting all the available data and publication and using recent technology of documentation, like for example 3D scanning. And also it is important to make the classification for all this data, because it will lead us to find out the missing information we need to complete. And also the analysis of this data will help us know the previous experience and to figure out the possible scenarios that Citadel will really face due to the climate change, especially if we make simulation to what really happened for the lighthouse before. And as I think the Mamluk architect himself, when he built this Citadel, made this before, but by his traditional way. So we have now, of course, all the technology to help us to make this simulation. The next important step, in my opinion, that we should make or begin to turn all this data to be digitized and launch an international website for Qaitbay Citadel. And in my opinion, not only Qaitbay, which is need this, but all the fortification or historical building on the northern coast of Africa. And of course, this website should include a virtual visit to the Citadel or a lot of interaction tools. And also this will help us to give all the audience, all the people, information about the importance of this fortification and this building. And it's very, very important thing because we will make them involved in the protection of this important structure. Another important solution is to take in our consideration that the worst scenarios that the Citadel could face, that it could be demolished and drawn, then it would become underwater heritage. As it means that we will deal with extremely different conditions. So perhaps it will be important in this case to prepare a hologram project for the Citadel. Or even, in my opinion, we could even make like a metaphysics, like Mark Dürr, he announced that we could make something like this and to move inside the Citadel, something like this. And actually, in my opinion, also we have another solution, but it is a little bit difficult, of course, to move the Citadel to another safe site. I don't know if it is possible or not at the moment, but it is not clear now. As I said, what is the scenario which we will face for the Citadel? Finally, I want to highlight the importance to illustrate the necessity of the international cooperation to begin a rescue project for all the heritage on the most threatened site on the northern coast of Africa, starting with Qaitbay Citadel. And thank you so much for your attention and hoping to meet you soon in Egypt and in Citadel of Qaitbay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that fascinating presentation and for some very interesting ideas as well, which I hope we get time to discuss later.
Thank you so much.
So our next speaker is Daniela Molinari, who is speaking from Italy. And Daniela's talk is titled The MOVIDA Project Towards a Better Evaluation of Flood Risk Mitigation Strategies. Daniela is Associate Professor at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Politecnico di Milano, and is speaking today on behalf of the whole MOVIDA team. So over to you, Daniela.
Okay, so good afternoon to everybody. The objective of my presentation today is to present you the results of the MOVIDA project. The starting point of my talk is the definition of cultural heritage given by the call for application of this conference. According to it, and according also to the viewpoint adopted in the MOVIDA project, cultural heritage can be defined as everything around us, because any natural or anthropic element of a territory shape such a cultural, environmental, and economic value of the society living there. Well, among climate adverse related impacts, increasing intensity and frequency of floods is the one that is expected to treat most the cultural heritage. So the need arises to developing tools to assess the full range of flood-related impacts damages as the knowledge base of flood risk management. Flood risk management that is also a key element of sustainable development goals, in particular as a tool to protect the human well-being from climate change related risk and to increase the worldwide resilience. So in such a context, the objective of the MOVIDA project was to reach an analytical evaluation of flood expected damage to support the implementation of the European Floods Directive, especially regarding the adoption of cost-benefit analysis and multi-criteria analysis of risk mitigation strategies. Indeed, the Floods Directive is the main tools that the European countries have to developing flood risk management plans. However, at present, flood damage assessments at the base of such plans are mostly qualitative, so hampering the adoption of CBA or MCA instrument, and so hampering the development of sustainable flood risk management. The MOVIDA project was developed in the Po River district, the biggest river district in Italy, in which about 20 million of people are located, as well as an important share of Italian economic activities. The working group was made up of 8 Italian universities with a specific expertise on flood damage assessment, the National Research Council, all of them coordinated by the River District Authority of the Po River. The challenges that we faced in the MOVIDA project were related to the need of considering all exposed assets, and so all types of expected damage, to identify specific physically based models for each damage type, and in particular models that were calibrated or validated for the Italian context, to implement institutional input data where possible, available for the whole district in order to guarantee consistencies within the analysis made within the territory of the district, and finally to develop an OpenGIS information system to elaborate input data and to represent analysis output. So according to these requirements, we decided to focus our analysis on the 5 categories of exposed assets included in the Floods Directive. However, according to the present state of art of damage modeling and according to the present knowledge on damage mechanisms, we decided to limit the evaluation for the moment on direct damage. The 5 categories of exposed assets were then further specified. So at the end, we focus our attention on the estimation of flood damage to people, roads and railways, strategic buildings, NATEC sites, environmental and cultural heritage assets, agricultural activities, commercial and industrial activities, and residential buildings. Well, the main result of the MOVIDA project is the development of a procedure for the estimation of flood damage assessment, for the estimation of flood damage at the mesoscale, that at the Italian level means at the census block level. The procedure is modular in the sense that there is a specific procedure, a specific model for each assets type. However, because of the present state of art, we were not able to reach the same level of details for all the exposed assets. Specifically, for some of them, a quantitative estimation of damage was possible, while in other cases, we limited our analysis to a qualitative approach, so in terms of high, medium, or low damage. Likewise, we were able to estimate real expected damage only for some categories of element, while for the others, we limited our investigation to the potential damage, so to the value of exposure. Finally, we were able to assess the damage in monetary terms, of course, only for those kinds of damage that are tangible in their nature. I will not go into the detail of the whole procedure, but an example of the procedure for the cultural heritage assets will be presented by my colleague Chiara Arrighi in the following workshop. The second result was the development of an open GIS information system, in particular an open plugin of QGIS that enable the implementation of the procedure in a semi-automatic way to support technicians, non-expert technicians in the implementation of the procedure. Then the procedure was implemented in 22 areas at significant risk in the district. To give you an example, I reported here the result that we got for one of these 22 areas, results that were reported in terms of damage maps for the different exposed items. Well, these maps are developed for different hazard scenarios in the area in order to reach a final estimation of flood risk in the area. Of course, one next development will be to change the hazard and the exposure vulnerability scenario at the base of the analysis in order to take into account of climate-related trends. Then it is worth noting to say that both the procedure and the related plugin were transferred to regional authorities that implemented the procedure in all areas at risk within the district. A critical next step for the conclusion of the project, for the completion of the procedure, would be the development of a synthetic indicator of expected damage that starting from the 9 flood damage assessment, flood damage maps that we have seen, allow us to characterize a territory and to prioritize risk mitigation strategies according to a proper multi-criteria analysis. Of course, this would require a participatory approach involving main local stakeholders, and this this participatory process is actually presently ongoing. I would like to finish my presentation by listing you all the potential application of MOVIDA beyond flood damage mapping. As you can see, MOVIDA allows to support a set of actions that are crucial to increase our resilience, like, for example, the definition of insurance premiums, the targeting of actions in emergency plans. And so MOVIDA can effectively support us in protecting our cultural heritage, our territory from climate-related risk. And that is all. I will thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for a very detailed presentation and perfectly to time again. So thank you for that. So I'd encourage the people watching to put questions in the chat as we go along, if you have any, and we'll deal with them at the end. But we'll move on now to our next speaker, Rita Fooh, who is speaking from Suriname. And Rita is the director of the National Archives of Suriname and a part-time lecturer at the History Department of the Anton de Kom University of Suriname. And she's speaking on behalf of her fellow authors of CARBICA-CHEN, and her talk is about empowering the Caribbean cultural heritage. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Cathy. My name is Rita Fooh, and I'm speaking on behalf of CARBICA, that's the Caribbean branch of the International Council on Archives. And Caribbean Heritage Emergency Network is the entity of CARBICA. I also want to thank ICRON and the British Council for inviting me to speak about this topic in the Caribbean. As you all know, with the increase in the number and tempo of extreme weather events caused by climate change, the Caribbean Cultural Heritage Institution have become very vulnerable. The small island development states were confronted with earthquakes, floods, volcano eruption, and hurricanes. And for your information, the Caribbean hurricane season runs from the 1st of June until November the 30th, with peaks in August and September. And every year, heritage professionals have to prepare for the worst. And examples of recent effects of climate change are in 2017, Hurricane Irma, Maria, and Jose. It struck the region very hard. For instance, in Saint Martin, the French part, also Saint Martin and Dominica, the British Virgin Islands. That was in 2017. And in 2019, that was in Barbados when Hurricane Dorian struck the island. And most recently also in El Salvador, the earthquakes there in Haiti, also last year. And also last year in 2021, the volcano eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So, looking at all these extreme weather events that was impacted by the global climate change, we as CARBICA, we strongly believe that the Caribbean region has to take action. So that's why we took the initiative to launch the Caribbean Heritage Emergency Network, especially since the region is scattered and stretched, and a coordination and focus point to safeguard the cultural heritage and to build resilience in the region was for us as CARBICA very important. So this is a picture of the eye of the hurricane. This is a picture from Dominica, and this was the land registry office in Dominica that was damaged by the hurricane in 2017.
Sorry, Rita. Sorry, Rita, I think you just need to move on the main screen because we can't see those slides. We're still on your first introduction slide.
Oh, let me see. Okay, so I think, let me see, I have to go back. Do you see it now? Yeah.
Yes, perfect. We're seeing Dominica in 2017. Yeah.
Yes, my apologies for that. So this was Dominica, and this was the British Virgin Island. This was a repository of the record management from the government of British Virgin Island. You see how the hurricane that was in 2017 struck BVI very harshly. So what we did as CARBICA, after the hurricanes of 2017, we believed strongly that we needed to organize to take action in the region. First, what we did was support our colleagues in the region. We conducted a damage assessment in Dominica, in BVI, in St. Martin by a paper conservator from Natural Archives of Curaçao. Afterwards, in October till November 2017, we conducted a mission supported by the Netherlands, the Ministry of Education and Culture, on several islands in St. Martin. Also, we did a fact-finding mission on Dominica, on the British Virgin Island, And lastly, in 2018, we organized a working conference on St. Martin, where we discuss a regional approach to disaster response and recovery. So a lot of goodwill was available during this conference to establish a structural alliance, just like the model on the Alliance for Response Group in the USA. Let me see. So what is the mission statement of the Caribbean Heritage Emergency Network? CHEN is the organization on safeguarding cultural heritage, and CHEN expert will provide training and preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation in the region. And they do so at the expense of the requesting party, or what we do, we also look for funding agency. And the mission of all involved with CHEN is to work for the protection of the cultural heritage in the region. And the objective of CHEN, there is a list there, but the most important one to facilitate regional and international responses to emerging the cultural property of cultural heritage property, especially by promoting risk preparedness, recovery, response and mitigation measures, train experts at national and regional level to prevent, response and recover disaster, and to act in advisory capacity for the protection of endangered heritage. And also, last but not least, to consult and cooperate with other bodies, including the UNESCO, the ECOM, the Smithsonian Culture Rescue Initiative, the Prince Claus Fund for Culture Emergency Response Program, and Archaeology, since we are a body of ICA, the International Council on Archives. How are we going to reach these objectives? By initiating alliances with this organization on regional, local, and international level. Also with national governments, for instance, with the regional office of CEDEMA. CEDEMA is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, with the Caribbean community, the UNESCO, and the Organization for East Caribbean States in the region, to advocate and raise awareness, to provide also professional expertise, and also to identify resources for disaster prevention and for rapid intervention in the emergency. So what we also did was also to develop our communication strategy. We divided that in four phases. The first one is the regular communication when there is no emergency in the region. And what we do then is to maintain the networking relation, to identify weaknesses within the region and develop training opportunity. For instance, we're at the beginning of the year and the hurricane season starts in June till September. So what we are doing now is to organize workshop, raise awareness in the Caribbean region. The second phase is the pre-emergency communication. That is to ensure heritage leadership in potential disaster sites, to ensure that they are prepared, to reassure the heritage leadership of CARBICA-CHEN support when needed, and to mobilize network for response and resources when needed. So during the emergency communication, what we do as far as possible is to maintain the contact with heritage leadership. And this is very challenging because whenever disaster events are happening in the region, we are confronted with communication challenges. To reach our colleagues in the region is very challenging. And for instance, we saw the tsunami with the island on the Pacific, and communication was and still is very challenging with other Chien network partners. So for the post-emergency communication, this is the last one, is to ensure proper procedures that they are in place to enter the disaster site. And the second one is to assist with recovery or re-establishing of heritage organization. So we are continuously, working on this communication strategy. So we don't have time to sit back and just wait for these disaster events to happen. So what we did in order to read.
Sorry to interrupt, Rita. If you could start to just wrap it up now. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So in order to reach our objectives, CARBICA-CHEN has initiated alliances with national, I already mentioned, international organizations. For instance, we organized a webinar collaboration with ICRON, Texas partner, with the UNESCO cluster office in Kingston. We recently conducted also a rapid risk assessment after the volcano eruption on St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In Suriname, we also organized a workshop to develop an emergency preparedness plan for all the heritage institutions for Suriname. And recently, we also launched our database with Chien professional. For instance, this is to also make Chien very visible to our colleagues in the region. If you go to our website, then you can click on documentary heritage, built heritage, and you see all the lists of CARBICA experts. So whenever you need a certain expert with specific expertise, you can contact them. So this is the website. And what we also do is to encourage our colleagues in the region to become an expert of Chien. So whenever a disaster is happening, we can also ask them to support us. This is our work plan for 2022-2023. And also communication, reaching out to our colleagues in the region, funding organization, also partnering with them, promote Chien also, and encourage national government, because it's very important to engage national government as an NGO, as an organization, professional organization. It's also important to engage this national organization, and also install a movable conservation lab. Recently, I was in discussion with the Prince Claus Fund also to fund this movable conservation lab. We're still in discussion with them, and to launch a digital repository for the region. So we are safeguarding this important collection in this digital repository. So these are our work plan or activities for the coming years. So thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much, and for persevering through the technical difficulties as well. So our next speaker is Dr. Kieran Westley, and he is a lecturer at the University or the Ulster University in Northern Ireland. And Kieran's talk today is entitled Assessing Climate Change Threats to Coastal Archaeology in the Middle East and North Africa. So over to you, Kieran.
I believe Kieran's not with us today, but he sent us his presentation. So I will be sharing my screen, and he's recorded his presentation for us.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
No problem.
In this talk, I'll discuss ongoing research into assessing climate change impacts on coastal archaeology in the Middle East and North Africa, which is being done as part of the Arcadia-funded MARIA Maritime Endangered Archaeology Project. I apologize for not being present for this conference, but I'm currently on fieldwork. To give you some more general background on MARIA, our aim is to document and assess threats to the maritime, coastal and underwater archaeology in the Middle East and North Africa. We've been running for 3 years now, and our team is based at the University of Southampton and Ulster University in the UK. We also work with numerous project partners in the MENA region, and we also work with our sister project, EMENA, based at the University of Oxford, Leicester, and Durham. There are many threats to coastal archaeology and in the MENA region, but in this talk I'll focus on the climate change aspects highlighted here. Like the rest of the world, MENA will be affected by sea level rise, and the main impacts will be coastal erosion and flooding. I've also indicated urban expansion and coastal development because it is an open question how people will respond to climate change and sea level rise. For example, through increased construction of coastal defences or inland to coastal migration as climate inland worsen. But we'd have less data on this to work with, so I'll focus in this talk on coastal erosion and flooding, the impacts of which you can see at these two key sites in eastern Libya, where active destruction of archaeological remains is ongoing as a result of these processes. So how are we at MARIA trying to investigate climate change impacts and threats to coastal archaeology? The first approach we use is through documentation. We identify and we map archaeological sites across the region, and we generate threat and disturbance assessments for each site. This includes not only known sites, but also new ones, which we try to identify primarily through satellite imagery. We also use other data sources, such as existing publications, archival material, and so forth. Effectively, any information we can get our hands on. This information is then uploaded to the EMENA database hosted at the University of Oxford, and effectively what this creates is a searchable open source database of all sites in the region with threat and disturbance assessments. To give you an example of documentation, this is Tokra in eastern Libya, Hellenistic to Roman period coastal settlement threatened by coastal retreat. Published literature showing 20 meters of coastal retreat between the 1960s and the early 2000s, and our own analysis highlights 11 meters of coastal retreat in between 2002 and 2019. And our local partners highlight that ongoing erosion or confirmed ongoing erosion is impacting archaeological material, as you can see in this image here. These images here show extracts from the database showing disturbances, past impacts, and threats, potential future impacts. And you can see the sort of the terminologies we use, and that we have certainty values to classify how certain we are about these interpretations. This theoretically means you can search the database for any site affected or likely to be affected by coastal erosion and retreat, or any particular threat or disturbance which you are interested in. So another way we're investigating the possible impact of climate change is by integrating our data with external models of climate and environmental change. We've worked in particular with the List Coast model of Vustukas and colleagues, and using also the coastal DM of Kalpenstrauss 2018. And these models focus on shoreline movement, which gives us an impression of coastal erosion and retreat, and also sea level rise, both long-term sea level rise, SLR, and also short-term extreme sea level, ESL, created by storms. And these just give you an impression of some of the numbers we've managed to generate in terms of sites that might be at risk. There are obviously caveats. Model resolution and complexity don't account for human actions and for complex local to regional scale coastal responses. I'm not going to talk any more about this particular piece of work because it is already published, and here's the reference to the paper if you are interested in this. So in part because of these uncertainties with the larger scale models, and also because site management will normally proceed on a national or sub-national basis, not these sort of global scales, we're also looking at shoreline change assessment at much more small scales using remote sensing and GIS. Effectively, this gives us in-depth analysis at particular key sites. I'll illustrate this with two examples, one of which is Apollonia in Libya, a Hellenistic, Roman and Byzantine harbour, one of the best preserved ancient harbours in the Mediterranean, full of archaeological structures. Erosion has been evident since the site was mapped in the early 19th century and continues to present. The question though is how fast is this erosion proceeding, and which parts of the site are most threatened? And these photos taken by our local partners in Libya just give some examples of the kind of damage and exposure of archaeological remains which is taking place at present as a result of coastal erosion. So we used high resolution historic and recent images to map this eroding edge and compare it at different time steps in order to find out how fast it was retreating over time. And these are examples of the images which we used. And these are the results. These warm colors indicate erosion or retreat, and the blue colors indicate advance. So you can see historically, up to 2010, it seems that erosion was concentrated here in this part of the site. However, we can see in more recent years, there's been an increased trend of erosion all across the western side of the site, and possibly the eastern side as well. So there are certainly hints that although erosion is progressive and not and proceeding relatively slowly, it is still continuing, and it is potentially increasing in recent years as well. And what does this mean for the future? If we plot these modern erosion rates, as shown in these yellow lines, so dotted line is 2050, solid line is 2100, we can start to see what might actually happen in terms of impacts on archaeology. So for example, at present day erosion rates, by 2100, the edges of these sites will be lost. And similarly here as well. But we also had to contend with the fact that some of the global models project that these erosion rates will increase with sea level rise. And under these, and these are the worst case scenario projections from the list coast model of Vuzdukas et al., using RTP 8.5, you can see a much more severe impact indicated by these red lines, with potentially half of these buildings eroded into the sea by the end of the century. So quite serious problems indeed. The second example I'm going to use here in terms of shoreline change assessment is from Al-Balid from Oman. This is a medieval port city, probably situated on a former island with numerous ruins including city walls, towers, a mosque, citadel, breakwaters, graves and tombs, some of which lie between the city wall and the modern shoreline. The problem here is slightly different to Apollonia. Instead of long-term erosion, what we have instead is the impacts of tropical cyclones, and that's the main question we're looking at. And we studied two events, Cyclone Mukunu of 2018 and Storm ARB1 of 2020. What we did was use satellite imagery to detect the amount of surface water pre-event, pre-cyclone and post-cyclone, and we compare these to find evidence of where surface water was located. And where we have extensive post-event surface water, this gives an indication of flooding or coastal retreat, as we can see in these examples. So after Mukunu, we have lots of flooding here, and the strip along the coast, which is suggestive of coastal retreat, and a similar pattern here with ARB1. Al-Balid is not really affected at this sort of larger scale, as far as we can see. However, we also used high resolution imagery to zoom in on Al-Balid and actually see if we can see any of these effects. And what we can see with Cyclone Mukunu, so here we have the pre-event, post-event, this is the comparison. We can see flooding along the southern face of the site, and also extensive coastal retreat here. The shoreline was located here before the cyclone and had retreated by several tens of meters after the cyclone. And we checked the tide records for the time to be clear that this was not the result of tide, and it's not. And you see a similar pattern here in ARB1, although we have indication that we have increased flooding down here on the southern corner of the site and also in the southeast corner as well. So we have clear impacts from these cyclones on the archaeological site or in its vicinity. As a final step, we wanted to check how common these impacts actually were. So we ran a shoreline change analysis using a time series of 203 Sentinel-2 images running from 2016 to 2020. And you can see the results here, with blue areas indicating coastal advance or accretion and red indicating coastal retreat. So you can actually see our cyclones and storms, indicated by the dashed lines, Mukunu and ARB1, fit into this nice cyclical pattern of coastal accretion and then coastal retreat during monsoon period, started or initiated during the monsoon periods. So it is part of a natural cycle. The question is, though, is this increasing over time? And there are certainly hints even within this time series that we have greater erosion than accretion. We also had to consider that these kind of things will likely be affected by climate change, in particular sea level rise, and also reduced sediment supply resulting from human action such as coastal protection works or upstream damming of rivers. We also have to contend with the fact that many models project intensified or more frequent cyclones, which will potentially increase the erosive power of these events, causing them to outweigh the ability of these beaches to recover in the intervening period. So Al-Balid may not be directly at risk from erosion, not directly impacted from erosion now, but it certainly could well be in the future. So in conclusion, at MARIA, we're trying to develop a comprehensive threat assessment for maritime and coastal archaeology, including consideration of climate change impacts. And we're starting to generate baseline data. and get some general patterns of terms of how sites across the region will be affected. And we're also producing detailed shoreline change assessments for key sites which highlight the complexities that exist at a local site level. And obviously, when all these things, support for our in-country partners is essential through training, documentation, and field survey. They will be responsible for managing this heritage, and we have to provide them with useful information which they can use. And finally, I'd just like to thank our funders and supporters, and also, more importantly, our in-country partners as well. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Kieran, although he's not here. Very interesting presentation. So we have a few minutes left for questions. I don't see many in the chat. If you do have a question, please pop it in the chat. I've also posed a question to you, the audience, to let us know your experience of water-related hazards for heritage, and if you have any ideas of what the best way to address these would be. I think I will turn now to the speakers and ask them a question. I know in the literature, the coast has been described as the battlefront when it comes to the impacts of climate change on cultural heritage. And I just wondered if you would agree, or if there's another way of approaching the problem, or perhaps what you think we need to do most urgently to address this problem. Would anybody particularly like to answer?
Hello.
Hi, yes, Professor.
Hi. Okay. For me, I think we have a lot to do to of course to face this problem, because actually we have in our history we have a lot of experience about what we faced before in such problem, environment problem and climate change, and in my opinion, we could use this experience with this previous experience, and actually I think it is important to collaborate. I think the main point which we should now concentrate on it, how all the world should collaborate together, and to feel that it is not this problem is not concerning one monument or one architecture place or one site, as maybe our colleague in all the presentation said, but it is concern for all our world site. And this world site, it is not, we couldn't lose them. We could lose them because it is, you know, it is such a part of our awareness, the culture, our culture, and it could also make conflict sometimes. So we could, to prevent this conflict, we should also save this site and to keep it safe as much as possible, because actually when we're talking about climate change, we don't have what scenario we'll face. You know, it is a rapid change, and even I think even the scientific, they couldn't have a clear vision about what will happen in the future. So depend on this, it is very important to go together and to make a documentation. In my opinion, the documentation and digitize all the information which we have, it is very important for us now, because at least if we lose the location, you should at least you have like a virtual or a digitized information about it, so you could at least make a reconstruction for the building again, or at least you make, like I said, like a hologram or a virtual space for it in the future. So it is my opinion. It is very important to concentrate on the documentation in this stage, and to make international projects to connect all the data we have, and we have like a channel to give us all the information day by day or second by second, because I think it could now we everything will change in one moment. It is 1 second could change a lot in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. We need the data, and I think perhaps Daniela, you have your hand up, and I don't know if it was to answer. There's a question about exactly that in a way. How do we deal with this uncertainty? And Aparna was asking you what were the parameters for assessing vulnerability for heritage sites. So I don't know if you want to comment on that or something else, please.
No, my idea was to answer to your first question. So what we need to do in order to increase our availability to understand the potential impacts of climate change on cultural heritage. And I think that I'm a hydraulic engineer, so I have a little bit different perspective. But when we try to understand which are the impacts of floods on a territory, what we miss now is a more, let's say, upscaled perspective. So far, the attention was very paid on the specific cultural heritage assets. So we know that there is a specific cultural asset that is at risk for flooding or for coastal erosion. And so we focus a lot of our attention on the specific actions that we must take on that specific assets. What we miss in our point of view and what we try to do with our project is to have a more global vision. So among all the cultural heritage assets, which are the most at risk, which are the most critical in terms of expected impacts, not only in terms of physical impacts, but also impacts for our cultural, social value of the society. So which are the most important to focus on, to be prioritized within a limited amount of resources that we have to face climate change. So I think that we have to compensate a very detailed study with a more broader study that allow us to understand the global vision, the global problem. And so this is one aspect, one of the main things that we need to do and that we lack in our current research and current approach to climate risk and cultural heritage.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I thought as I was listening to the speakers, I was making notes, and I thought that the regional partnerships and capacity building that was reported from the Caribbean actually sort of works very well alongside the hazard mapping and of your project and of Kieran's, and then also the imaginative adaptation solutions that were coming from Egypt. So I think, you know, everything together is probably what we need. So I don't know, Rita, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you, Cathy. So the important thing is listening to my colleague presenters is that we join forces. You know, we are here in the South, in the Caribbean area. Our colleagues are from North Africa, the Pacific. We have to join forces and share our knowledge and expertise about, you know, the impact climate change has on our cultural heritage. Because looking at the Caribbean area, all these small islands are surrounded by water. So it's very difficult to move, you know, a monumental site elsewhere because some of the islands are very flat. So, you know, our colleague from Italy and the other one, the last presenter, they have developed some strategies. So maybe we have to, you know, it's not maybe, but for sure, we have to join forces, and not only with cultural heritage practitioners, but also with the scientists to look for, you know, sustainable solution to you know, I was saying attack, but to address climate change. So that's my message for this panel session. Join forces, work together, share our experiences, and also not only with cultural heritage practitioners, but also with the scientists, you know, because cultural heritage professionals are not able to do it alone, you know. So that's my message for the audience.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. Now, I know we've gone over time. I don't know if we're allowed to keep going or if we have to stop. There's a couple of questions in the chat about more specific issues. We can keep going. Oh, great. Okay. So Marcy is asking if anybody has experience with changing groundwater levels or increasing intensity of rainfall along the coast. So I think she means in terms of coastal erosion can be very visible, but perhaps there are less visible changes that are also affecting sites. Does anybody want to talk to that?
Okay. I think we have this problem here in Egypt in general and in Cairo. We have this problem in Fustat and in ElSiedy. We have like underground water, and this become a problem by years and become now like a lake, big lake. And now actually, and even we face a lot of problem, and for all the archaeological sites in Fustat for this problem, especially for Mashhad Al Taba. It is a historical building, belong to the ElSiedy period around the 9th century, and it is completely drawn under this water, and unfortunately they couldn't stop the increase of this underground water, and that's why now they make like moving the structure to another place, safe place, and actually they are working now on this project to move this to be in a high level ground, and it will be this rebuild this building again very close to the new Museum of Civilization in Fustat, and because actually this was the only solution they could save this site on this monument. They couldn't stop the increasing. Now they are trying to make a project just to perhaps stop the flooding of this water, because actually they don't know from where exactly this water come, and now they are trying to make like some barriers or something to stop this water to become in a high level, and actually now it is a little bit stable. But of course, but that's after they destroy all the archaeological site in this site, and now, as I said, they move the main structure very close to the Museum of Civilization. So this is our experience here in Cairo for the underground water.
Thank you. I think that does raise the issue as well of adaptation solutions, and how actually sometimes the responses to these hazards can be more damaging than perhaps the hazards themselves, in terms of, you know, like you said, the destruction of archaeology or the building of hard coastal defenses, which maybe moves the erosion somewhere else. And maybe there's a role for heritage professionals to actually help people accept the loss of heritage as well. You know, maybe sometimes we need to be the ones who say it's okay, we can document it and let it go, rather than building these big walls. I don't know if you would agree or disagree with that in terms of.
For me, I'm as an archaeologist, I like to keep the building. It is not, of course, the documentation is very important, and it is another solution. But for me, to keep the building is my main aim, my main purpose, and it is and I couldn't lose the building itself and the structure, or the main art monument. So for me, I couldn't make the people accept this, but for some reason perhaps it is not in my hands. It's like I said, it is like climate change or something like this. Sometimes you don't have any, you don't have, you are not the main reason for this problem, but it is, you know, this is an environment problem, or it is a climate change that you couldn't make anything to it. So the solution in these conditions that I will actually perhaps not to make the people accept the losing of the heritage, but first I should make them how to keep this heritage, and how to actually make it more or less the rapid of this climate change be less effective on the monument, on our heritage. So I will not make them accept or not accept, but I will explain to them the situation and make them cheer for me for the solution. Because sometimes, as you said, not only the scientific, the scientists and expertise, they couldn't have, they don't have the real solution. But perhaps if you make it, all the people share with you, with their experience, with their thoughts, with their ideas, perhaps they could help you to keep this and to give you much solution for this problem. Especially if we are talking about climate change. It is not, like I said, it is not a political or not a problem that I pose it with by myself, but it is something like just happened. So I should make people share with me this problem. It is my opinion.
Yes, yes. Well, I think by sharing the problem, you're maybe also helping them to become aware of climate change, and maybe if we can be more sustainable, we can reach our targets in terms of reducing carbon. So I think that we also need to think about that in our solutions, that we're not contributing to the problem of climate change in the solutions we choose. There was a question as well in the chat, which I've just seen, which I think was for you, Rita, which was about how meteorological induced climate change comes together with hydrogeological induced flooding. So like you were mentioning about earthquakes and things. So if climate change affects the meteorological induced flooding, how can it be linked to risks of hydrogeological induced flooding? From Binta. Rita, I think you're muted.
So to answer this question, I have to look into further, because at this moment I cannot respond to this question, because it's very detailed questions and I have to look it up.
I don't know if Binta's in the audience, if she wants to explain, or if maybe Daniela, and perhaps it was related to your project, MOVIDA.
Well, in our project, we didn't deal with other risks than flooding, and but of course, protecting cultural heritage from earthquakes or landslide, above all in countries like Italy, is critical, is a key elements of our policy. And what I can suggest is that above all, when we live in a territory where multi-risks are present, we do not have to forget about the coexistence of such risk. So what I suggest is always to take an integrated vision, trying to look for strategies that do not resolve one problem, contrasting the other. So, for example, regarding residential buildings, we are doing a very interesting research showing that the implementation strategies that are adopted, for example, for making a building energy efficient are not always comparable with solutions that would be required for making the buildings less vulnerable to floods, so less vulnerable to earthquakes. So I think that fighting climate change related risk is always important, but we have to bear in mind that we live in a complex environment where we have a multitude of risks. And so our solutions should be targeted to an integrated reduction of the different risks affecting a specific territory. And so we should look at cultural heritage assets from this perspective, trying to find the right solution, the more balanced solutions with respect to this complexity, this coexistence of risk. And so this is what we are trying to face in now in terms of research for residential buildings. Of course, when we move to climate, to cultural heritage assets, it's even more complicated, but I think that the way of thinking, the way of approaching the problem should be the same for any kind of assets that is exposed to multitude risks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that reminder of how complex this issue is. Yeah, okay. Does anybody have any last comments or they'd like to make? No? Okay, well, I think we can wrap it up there. We've run 20 minutes over with this great discussion, and I want to thank the speakers for staying on and for all the audience for staying on as well. I know I found it fascinating, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And there's lots more going on today, so hopefully I'll see you in some of the future sessions. And good luck with fighting the fight. And we go forward together. I think that should be the message, right? It was good to see you all. Thank you very much, and thank you to the FAR team behind the scenes.
Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleagues. Have a good day.
I just wanted to share as well, if anyone had registered for the It Is Flooded workshop, it has started, and the link is in your email inbox, but please email ccp@icram.org if you are unable to find the link. And then the last session for today will be the Climate Open Mic at, let me just get the time right for you, at 4:10 Central European time. So thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you later as well.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.